Political strategy can manifest itself in many forms. There's smear campaigns, ad buys, but this year, voter suppression and fraud has taken center stage.
Now to President Trump escalating his campaign against voting by mail.
Long lines and confusion.
Shortage of ballots.
Partisan electoral maps. This
and
this could be a preview of the general election in November.
But if there is one state where the actual act of voting is a factor, it's North Carolina. Political and racial division in North Carolina runs deep. Electoral tensions can be traced all the way back to the 1898 election, when the KKK used violence to discourage black voter turnout. The state's voting history has been split pretty evenly. Their deep Southern Democratic roots began to turn red in the 1970s, following President Johnson's support and signatures of the Voting Rights Act of 1965 and the Civil Rights Act in '68. And not much has changed. It's still a swing state. Just look at 2016, when they voted for both Donald Trump and Democrat Roy Cooper for governor. Another layer to this is the state's rapidly changing demographics. The state has seen some of the highest net in-migration from blue states like California, New Jersey, and New York, gaining more than 10,000 residents from each state just in 2018. People of color, unmarried women, and millennials, voting blocs that traditionally vote for Democrats, are growing and will make up more than half of the eligible voters in the 2020 election. Similar to 2016, the Trump campaign has put race at the center of his re-election messaging. But that could backfire for Trump in a state like North Carolina, especially as the national debate over mail-in voting and possible voter fraud is spreading like wildfire. There was a serious case of voter fraud by a Republican candidate that rendered an entire election illegitimate. There's been legal battles over gerrymandered maps and voter ID laws, not to mention corruption implicating top GOP officials. So how does this impact the 2020 election? Let's break it down. Back in 2010, Republicans won control of both the House and the Senate, and they've been working to change the political infrastructure of the state ever since, resulting in Republican control of 10 out of the 13 congressional seats. Because in 2013, the Supreme Court's landmark decision in Shelby v. Holder allowed 9 states, including North Carolina, to now change their election laws without that federal approval. And within 2 months, the state legislature passed a new law imposing stricter voter ID rules. Democrats in the state had been filing lawsuits against a lot of these actions since 2010, including a group of voters that sued the North Carolina GOP in federal court. Their argument? Republicans were intentionally concentrating black voters into a handful of state, Senate, and congressional districts. As political tensions increased across the state, the lower courts had blocked 2 major efforts by the GOP, deciding that their voter ID laws were unconstitutional and that their redistricting had relied too much on race. These decisions are fresh in the minds of North Carolina voters, and Trump's stances on voter ID laws.
The time has come for voter ID.
Voter fraud.
If we went to mail-in balloting, our election all over the world would look as a total joke.
And his overall rhetoric on race.
Everybody's called a racist now.
Could push the evolving electorate in North Carolina and their 15 electoral votes back to blue in November.